So let's go ahead and talk about mobile ministry, but talk about it through the context, or at least the framework of messaging. Does that mean, am I in the frame-ish sort of kind of maybe?
Yes.
Yes?
It was just having a problem starting up.
Oh, okay. No problem. All right. Well, that's the beginning. Maybe I trimmed that part. All right. So, to the title. And I'm doing I did this title borderline on purpose, mostly because I did not know exactly how to title this. We're going to talk about mobile messaging, or in terms of mobile messaging in regards to communications. But the original design for this talk, I was going to talk about person-to-person messaging. If you will, the stuff that happens off the grid, stuff that happens on your mobile phone, but not necessarily stuff that happens on the internet. And there are two products that do this, and do this pretty impressively. One is called FireChat, and the other is called Bleep. And there are several more of these. And I'm going to actually get back down to that line as to what these are. But before then, just a real quick, little bit review. Selfies. Selfies are cool, right? Now here's one of the really cool questions. I'm going to just pwn it to you. I'm going to do the whole wait 7.5 seconds because 10 seconds of silence is deadly when you're talking. But where do people usually share their selfies? Think about it. Facebook, social media. Believe it or not, we send it to somebody else, or we use it as an avatar. If you will, it's not necessarily broadcast as much as we narrowcast it. We send it to a specific audience. We want that specific person or group of persons to see us in our element, or whatever the idealized view of us is. And I had fun with my selfies, because I've been taking selfies at just about every spot that I've come across. So, like the one here is at the Gap in Sydney, which is really nice because it looks like I'm hanging over the edge to a degree. Then you have the other one right here, right down the street from Treetops. And I took that right before I decided to take a sprint and run down the hill, because I thought it was really cool seeing that mountain in the background. So I was trying to make it work. All right, got it. In the background. And then, I knocked off my bucket list when I got to the Opera House in Sydney. That was part of my bucket list. I had to get to the Opera House. And so, the approval you got on your bucket list is that thumbs up, right? That you made it, you got there. And all of these I've actually shared with different people at different times. And it's pretty neat how I've shared it, because none of them have I shared it by broadcasting it on social media. And none of it's gone onto a website. As a matter of fact, there's actually one selfie that I took that I changed my avatar in social media to that selfie. And only because I know some folks are actually paying attention to that. Every other way that I've shared this, I've shared it through a messaging service. It's either been a multimedia message, or a private message, or another messaging service that I've been using. I've really not shared this stuff out. And it's kind of neat. But I would do that for a reason. Because there are some things that we like to share, some methods of interaction that we like to have with one another that make a lot of sense in a broad context, an almost broadcasting type context. There are other things that make a little bit more sense to us in a narrow cast framework, or with certain groups or certain particular people. And we've gone through the numbers already. We are social. We talked about things like, we talked about time spent on the internet. How much time are people spending on the internet per country? And I like this. This is a really good graphical representation of what's happening. Access through laptop or desktop, and access through a mobile device. Because a lot of our conversation started by ICCM, we talked about time spent on the internet and getting to where people are. And even if we're not in an area where the internet is really flush, when people get it, they're spending a lot of time on it. They're not really spending time off of it. And as a matter of fact, what's happening, this is a beautiful snapshot, but what's been happening over time is more people are spending time, A, online, and B, doing it on a mobile device. So we talked about that too, where are they spending their time on the mobile device? I mean, that's an excellent graphic that says, in different countries, how are people? Percent of the population. Okay, yeah, only 10% of China is getting online. And then 10% of a billion is a whole lot of people. And where they're spending their time, social media, mobile this, or this app, or that app. And that's kind of cool, because that gives us an idea as ministries of how we are to actually pursue relationships with these persons. How do we define opportunities? How do we define goals? And how do we actually resolve where the gospel actually, the corner, the uttermost parts? How do we define uttermost parts? We figure that out here, and numbers like these. And so we talk, or at least I talk. I talked a bit. We talked about the future, about things that are to come. And we said, it's going to be really nice when you just get to put your phone on your finger, or a little earwig, or you get to do. Did you get the message? No? Hold on. That might be a future. We talked about a future where folks had capacities to carry hard drives in their pocket that had their own power supply and a hard drive or a flash card to them. And how I'm a walking broadcast agent. The radio antenna goes in my head, not on the corner or the side of the mountain. We talked a little bit about the theology of mobile ministry, because what does it mean when we actually do offer connectivity or offer content? What does it mean for us to go beyond, simply saying that you've got the gospel in your hand? What does the gospel actually transform us into? Or are we okay with that? And lastly, we talked a little bit about content and context, because it's not just giving me the content, but it's also meeting me in the context of where I am. The young boys who are staying next to me upstairs, we've seen each other every day since I've been here. Every day. And every day that I've seen them, they've been doing homework. Hence, I've not said hi. This is the first day that we spoke to each other. And you know what they wanted to talk about? My shoes. It's kind of cool. Context is pretty neat. It's amazing how small little things like that draw us into a conversation with each other. Those conversations tend to be fairly important to us. And so, because, these are kind of points that we talked about, I did decide. I said, it's probably better to pull the other talk out my back pocket. It's probably better that we talk about the way that we actually share things, a way that we actually work around this conversation. Which means, because this is ICCM, and there are two things that ICCM communications are really good at: Yahoo groups and email. We should probably talk about those, right? Because that's the way everybody else is going to talk to us, right? So let's talk first about email. What makes email comfortable? It works. Doesn't matter if you have AOL, Earthlink, Prodigy. Sorry, I'm taking some folks back a little bit. Gmail, Yahoo, Mail.com, Yandex. Doesn't matter what email service you have, they all talk to each other. That's pretty nice and reliable. What else makes email work?
It usually gets there.
It gets there. So it's not just reliable in the sense that it works with every other service, but it actually goes everywhere. It gets there. It's got some really cool fail-safes. It's also got some really cool security issues and some security benefits. Email is funky. It's neat. And we like it. One of my favorite parts about email is Outlook. I know. You should probably not say that. But Outlook actually showed me how email actually makes sense. I don't necessarily care to use Outlook on every device. I actually prefer not to. But one of the things that Outlook showed me: filters and rules. I don't have to deal with the deluge of stuff. My inbox does not have to keep saying 3-digit unread. Yeah. So I deal with filters and rules all the time. There used to be this email product called Zenobi, inbox, written backwards. And I was like a happy camper. I was like, that looks really cool. It made Outlook pitifully slow for a hot minute. But then once it did its thing and indexed my entire inbox, I can use these filters, these text filters, to kind of get anywhere I want to. Email for me became another brain. And the rules for email became my boundary against, talking too much or engaging in conversations that I really didn't care to get in right now. I have a filter when emails come in from Dave that, it goes into my deal with that in 24 hours box. This way. I have another filter that says to this person, shoot them an automatic reply. I'm always out of the office. But that's okay, because email that's what email kind of brings to the table. And that's okay. But believe it or not, everybody doesn't like email. Okay? if you talk to somebody that's younger than me these days and you ask them about email, one of the things that you'll hear about them is that, oh, the old people stuff. Why would I use email? I could just use a text message to say the same thing, and it's a lot shorter. Why would I? You can't do an email for professional, text message for professional communications. Well, yeah, you kind of can.
Yes.
Give or take a few rules and maybe some technical ways. You can probably pull it off, but young person, you must use email. At least while you're in the office talking to this not young person. Okay, cool, I get it. But there was this other thing that kind of popped out. Social media. This is where they said meet me instead. If you don't want to do email, can you meet me on Facebook? Not professional enough, but okay, that might be consideration. Just like email is a linear conversation, but not so like email. Social media allows a little bit more. I can have public and private items. To those of us that didn't grow up in IRC land, that didn't grow up in mail groups land, that stuff is kind of amazing. Seriously, it's really amazing to them. Then you tell them that's pretty much been the internet. It's always been social. Now you check this out. So, one of the stats in that we are social talked about how much time that people spend in social media. Now, think of it like this. So I'm gonna I'll put this time in perspective to you. There are 24 hours in a day. Okay, we should probably all sleep. Probably 6 to 8 of those. So I'll just round ball and say a third of that 24 hours were sleep. So that leaves us with 16 waking hours. Okay? Inside of 16 waking hours, people are spending 20% of that in social media. You say, that's crazy. How could you spend that much time in social media? Hey, guess what? We actually spend 20% of our time watching TV as well. Anywhere from 2 to 3 hours a day is spent watching TV. A lady looked at me recently when that statistic came up and said, that's impossible. Well, I don't watch that much TV. I was like, yeah, you do. You got the TV on when you watch the news in the morning. That's about a half an hour to an hour. You might watch the TV in the afternoon, so you got the other news program on. That's another half an hour. You go ahead and put the news on in the evening, and you got the local news, and then you got the national news, which brings you to a whole hour. Boom, we're already at 2 hours already, and we didn't even talk about your favorite show. We actually spend a lot of time in this stuff. Now, those numbers, while being really fun, I guess if I'm in the Philippines, it probably is a lot of fun. 4.3 hours spent on social media, and I'm awake for 16. Which means 25% of my time is spent on a social network. Yee! That's a whole lot of time chatting, sharing pictures, hiding from my parents. But it's real. It's the truth. Social media really does have this kind of effect on folks. Look, how much time do we spend on social media against the rest of our time on the internet? Those numbers are really close to 50%. I used to do statistics because I was a public relations major in college. And every time that we talked about statistics, you were always told it was a really cool, simple rule. Take whatever number that they give you and add 3%. And then take whatever number they give you and then subtract 3%. Somewhere in that range, you'll have the real number. Because the number that's presented to you is not it. 3 standard deviations is about 3%. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Wait a minute. 66% of my time, if I'm in Singapore, is spent on social media. So, of the 16 waking hours that I have in the day, and a quarter of that time being spent online, I'm spending almost 70% of that time just in social media. What am I doing for the rest of the time that I got to spend so much time in social media? And if I'm doing that during that time, then what are the opportunities that I may be missing or may not be missing? We hear it all the time. You're not on Facebook? But can't you keep up with people? You're not on this network or that network? Because more and more, we are spending our digital lives in this shared common space. Now, that might be okay, there are reasons for that. But there is also a bent to this data that we probably should pay a little bit of attention to. It is a bit more youth-oriented, a good bit. Vast majority of folks that are coming online are either middle class, considered economically middle class, and they're usually younger than 35. Usually. Okay. Which means there's a bend towards the time that they spend online and what they would spend time doing. It truly means they're not going to spend time doing email. They're going to spend a little more time doing social media. So that means if all you want to do is talk to them via email, you probably lost them. It doesn't mean that your email newsletter doesn't work, but it does mean that your email newsletter also is one quiver. It's not the only quiver that you should use in order to direct your communications. Social media is really interesting because it's a back channel. Back channel where, if you will, it's the channel of the comments. Okay? Ladies understand this very well. Guys, we don't really understand it. We don't talk behind people's back. It's not a thing that we do. Ladies understand this. I'm just kidding. As a broad generalization. Extra broad. But it is kind of true. Every time that there's a situation going on, watch how some ladies congregate with themselves and they have a conversation about the conversation while something's going on. It's a back channel talk. Or maybe you were here at ICCM and you were like, I want to know what other people are thinking about ICCM. So you go to Twitter, you go hashtag ICCM AU. What else is going on here? The back talk. The stuff that's happening, in the background. That's normal. And that's where social media kind of excels. It's not the main thing that's happening. Well, at least you're not doing an uprising in the Middle East. But it's a back channel talk. It's telling you what else is culture thinking about. In what ways is the big thought being talked about by the little thoughts? It's targeted. It's really targeted. Social media is all about big data. Big data is all that social media is. How do we target folks? How do we understand what they're responsive to? We had a presentation earlier that looked at video rates on a Facebook page. And one of the things that we looked at, Facebook is a social network. So what were we trying to understand about those numbers? How many people looked at it? How many people liked the video? How many times did they watch the video and then stop watching the video before the video was done? Who got to the end? 3% was it? Got to the end of the video? 100% of the 100% of folks that started, 3% got to the end. Yay, nay, is that good? Is that not good? Okay, when did they drop off? And where did they go when they dropped off? We can see that they clicked somewhere else. And a third of those people clicked somewhere else. They went somewhere. That's one of the things that social media allows. Radio does not allow that. For as good and as wide as reach as radio is, you still don't know who listened to it until you had a call to action happen and then they showed up at your event. Or they called in and complained. Or better yet, that they said, we're cutting the funding because we don't think anybody's listening. Social media has the other characteristic of being very wide and being very narrow at the same time. Very wide, Facebook. Very narrow, we will talk about knitting. Very wide, Christendom. Narrower, we'll talk about missions. Narrower still, we'll talk about Wi-Fi Bible. Social media allows that entire range of conversation to happen. It's wide and deep and narrow all at the same time. There's an advantage there. There's also a disadvantage there. This is why there's an advantage in social media, but at the same time, why it's not it. It's not the only thing. And it kind of leads me back to the title. I talked about a couple of applications. These applications are centered around a concept called messaging. It's not necessarily social media, but it kind of acts like it. It's not necessarily email, but it kind of sort of acts like it. It's not necessarily much of anything except a conversation. But it's a conversation that's being started by the individual person's inside, not necessarily by a network outside. And some of those conversations have gotten very big. It's just a little big. This is a look, we are social stated, this is a look at social networking platforms, or if you will, social communications platforms. Number one, obviously, Facebook. Oh, it's big, it's huge, it's the third largest country in the world. But what's not that far behind it? QQ. What's not that much far behind that? WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, WeChat, They're not social networks. Those are chats. That's instant messaging. Do you mean to tell me that in all that we do online, that people just want to talk to each other?
I can't say I was secure, mate.
It doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't show up on the top 10. 15 it does. It doesn't show up on the top 10. Which is scary, right?
How many remember the last one we used?
There's a lot of folks using that now. Actually, which is weird though, IRC is not on the list, and that's actually still widely used, quite widely used in the IT community. But it makes you think a little bit, doesn't it? We spend a whole lot of time thinking, talking, walking about, ooh, mobile website. And then we spend a little bit more time, maybe not so great sometimes with the greatest tenor of voice, mobile app. But then you look around and you go, where are people? They're messaging each other. They're talking. They're making good chat with each other.
On that statistics, it included voice in that as well, didn't it?
It's part of messaging.
So there's no difference between that and telephone,
It is and it isn't.
except in the charging basis.
So telephoning is considered core to the messaging experience, but it's considered an aspect of the experience, not the experience. Does that make sense? Yeah. Don't ask me. I don't make the rules. I just interpret them. But in a very real sense, messaging does include